What's going on, everybody? I was live streaming a couple of nights ago and we were painting this little jerkbait, doing some fun colors on a translucent paint job. And we had a viewer request, which was to paint a Northern Pike pattern. Now, I have never personally seen a Northern Pike, so the paint job I came up with is based off of Google Images, so I'm sure the colors might be slightly off or there's a ton of different variations to it. So the one I came up with was just based off of the Google Images. You guys can let me know if I was close or way off. But the blank we are using today is a 5¼ inch minnow swim bait with 7 joints from Barlow's Tackle. Now this is one of those blanks that has the fabric-like joints in the middle. And so if you haven't seen my other video where I talk about those, all I do is I use rubber bands and put inside there. One, it kind of stiffens up the bait and then also keeps those free of paint and potentially some clear coat, depending on what kind of clear coat you're using. If you guys want one of these blanks for yourselves, I will have the link down in the description below for Barlow's Tackle. Since this bait is already white, I'm not going to worry about doing a base coat of white. We're just going to jump right into our colors. And the first color we're going to be doing is going to be an iridescent yellow. Now we're going to be spraying some transparent colors over top of this color because I don't want it to be that vibrant. But the game plan is we're going to leave the whole belly white and we're going to give the entire rest of the bait a nice layer in the iridescent yellow. Okay, with our yellow on, you can see the nice fade into the white belly on the bait. Next color up, and we're going to be mixing a couple of colors here in a minute too, so we're just working on our main base colors. But the next color up is going to be a transparent sand. So the game plan with the transparent sand is we're going to have a white belly, a little bit of yellow showing, and then we're going to cover up the rest of that yellow. Now it's a transparent color. I'm going to be spraying it pretty lightly. That way we don't completely cover the yellow. We're not trying to turn it sand. We still want a little bit of that iridescent yellow poking through. So you should have something about like that. White belly into some yellow and the sand covering it up. I gotta clean out the airbrush and we're gonna come back in and darken this bait up just a little bit. For our next color, we're actually going to be mixing a transparent tropical green and a transparent light brown. The tropical green by itself is just a little too bright for the paint pattern that we're going to be doing, and I think we might have actually mixed these two colors up in either the last video or a couple of videos ago. I don't remember exactly. But I'm going to be doing quite a bit of it because we're going to be doing this twice. First off, we're going to be doing just like 1 drop of the brown. And let me see where that gets us. I want it to be a little bit more brown than that. So I'm going to go ahead and go for 2 more drops here. There we go. That's a little bit more what I'm looking for there. So I'm going to add some of that to the airbrush real quick. So with our custom color mixed up here, we're going to be making in the bait go from white to a little bit of yellow to the sand, and we're going to be doing that green right over top of the back of the bait and then have it fade into the sand. I'm going to make sure and hit the head pretty good as well. Okay, with all of our base colors on, it's time to start adding in some more detail. And what I'm really trying to do here is just add some texture to the bait, which will make it look a little bit more realistic. So we're going to be throwing on some netting, and the netting that I'm using today is some fabric. Now this is a piece of a bag that can be found in the laundry section at Walmart. It's used to wash delicate clothing in there, and I just cut out a little section of it. If you don't have this at home and you're still wanting to paint this pattern today, I'm sure some normal scale netting would work as well. Okay, now that we got our monstrosity of a fishing lure here, it looks pretty crazy. Got it all clamped on nice and tight. What I'm going to be doing now is taking the same green that we mixed up earlier, and I'm going to be darkening it up a little bit. So I'm going to add one more drop of the brown, or two. Hold on here, I got a little bit of a mess. There we go. And then I'm also going to be adding one drop of the black. So with the darker green, we're going to cover the entire back of the bait and then try to have it fade into our yellows and tans towards the bottom. There we go. I am pretty happy. I think, kind of hard to tell with all the netting, but I think that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to clean out the airbrush and then we'll move on to our next color. Okay, next up, we're going to be just taking our transparent brown and we're going to be keeping this color up towards the top of the bait. So right where it goes from the side to the top, right on that ridge right there, we're going to give it a nice layer of the brown. Okay, gonna hit this with a hair dryer and then we'll be able to take off our netting and see what we got. Looking pretty juicy. I put it back on our helping hands here. There you can see pretty good the nice crazy looking texture we got going on there. Next thing we're going to be doing is going to be adding some opaque red to the airbrush, and the game plan with the red is we're going to hit the tail, and then since we have it loaded up in the brush, I'm going to go ahead and hit the bottom of the mouth just a little bit. Okay, now I know their tails are not that bright of a red, so we're going to come back in and darken that up in just a second here. We're also going to darken up the back of the bait and the head right up by the eye and the gill plate. Instead of doing just black, I figured we could add some black to our green and brown mixture that we still got going on. I want it to be pretty dark, so we're going to add a couple drops, but I think that might look a little bit better than just going straight black. Okay, I'm going to start with the back of the bait and the head of the bait, and then we'll take it off of our helping hands and do some stencil work on the tail. To do our little bit of stencil work, I'm going to take it off of the helping hands and put it on the car sponge to help hold everything in place while we lay our stencil down. The stencil is also going to be one from Barlow's Tackle. I can have this link down in the description below if you guys want one. We're not doing a whole lot with it. I'm really just going to be adding some spots to the tail. using our same green, brown, black mixture that we got loaded up in the airbrush. And I still think that tail is a little bit brighter than what it should be. So I'm just going to real lightly do a nice dusting of our darker green. So here's something that I forgot to do that I'd done. I always do like a practice, like a warm-up before I film. Helps me get in the groove of painting. So on the warm-up bait, I took a darker green before we did our stencil, and I added some kind of like vertical stripes, real lightly on like every other one. And that kind of helped break up the pattern just a little bit. There's no perfect patterns in nature. So if you're trying to go for more realism, I think having a variation along the side of the bait helps with that just a little bit. I forgot to do that on this one, so we won't worry about it, but I did want to throw that out there if you want to add one more little bit of variation, some lines, some darker lines in between these before you put the stencil down would help with that. But now it is time to clean out the airbrush, and then we're going to move on to one of our final steps with the paint. Okay, last thing we got to do to really make this bait look like a Northern Pike is add a whole bunch of splotches down the side of the bait. Now, I was trying to think of a couple of ways that we could go about doing this for people at home that don't have a good way of making stencils, and the best thing I could come up with was using a toothpick, and we're going to be adding a whole bunch of little lines on there. Now, you could cut out a stencil or something like that, but I was trying to think of a quick and effective way of being able to do this pattern. The color we're going to be using for it is once again another custom mixed color, and that is going to be a mixture of the transparent sand and opaque white. The white's going to do two things. One, it's going to help brighten up the sand color, and then also this is transparent, so it's pretty thin, so you'd have to do like 1 or 2 layers, or you have to probably do 2 to 3 different layers over top of it to actually get it to stand off. If you had an opaque sand, that might work by itself, but I do want them to be brighter, so we're going to be mixing it with some opaque white. I'm going to be doing heavier on the white. About 10 drops of white, and I'm going to start with just 1 drop of the transparent sand, mix that together and see where that gets us. Definitely want it to be darker, so I'm going to add 2 more drops of the sand. Still not quite there, so I think I'm going to add a drop of our transparent brown, light brown that we've been using this whole time. And maybe that'll do it. Okay, this is starting to look a lot better. On camera, it's still, hopefully it's showing through okay for you guys. It still looks pretty light. Almost white, I should say, but that's the color I'm looking for here. Okay, so if you're trying to get this exact color, that's 10 drops of opaque white, 3 drops of sand, and 1 drop of light brown. You'd probably be able to get away with a different color combo, but I'm trying to get better about when I'm mixing up custom colors, keeping track of exactly how much of each color I'm using. That way you guys can replicate it at home. Okay, so with our toothpick, our car sponge, and our mixture of white, I do have a glove on. I'm sure you've probably noticed already. I do have a glove on. That way I can grab the bait and hold it in place without getting the oils from my fingers on there. A lot of these Northern Pike have the little lines up on the gill plate and stuff. I'm going to do that towards the end. So what we're going to start with is just grabbing a little bit of white on the toothpick And I'm just going to come in and start adding some nice little splotches like that. Now I think the size of your splotch should be based off the size of the bait. This one's a pretty thin and narrow bait. So I didn't want too big of splotches. That's why I was struggling trying to figure out a good way to do a stencil that you could use the airbrush, but it would be such a tiny little circle to cut out by hand. So for this one, we're just going to go in and do it manually with the toothpick.
You have to be your biggest fan. And when things are really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that. Because you don't know who you're going to meet, who you're going to meet, who you're don't know who you're going to meet, who you're
And there we have it. I might go back in and touch up a few more of them or add a couple more. Now, I couldn't tell on Google if there was spots on the back. It kind of makes it look like a trout to me. Maybe that's how they look. I'm not, like I said, I've never seen one in person and only going off of images. So you guys let me know, should there or should there not be spots on the back. For the eyes, I have decided to go with these orange, red, and black ones. So I'm going to get these glued in real quick. And there we have it, the Baker Builds Northern Pike paint pattern, for now anyway. So I guess let me know if I'm close or way off, and if I'm way off, I'll take some feedback from you guys. We can come back and do it again. I was going to shout out the person who was requesting the Northern Pike pattern, but it was on a live stream, and I guess it does not save the comments from whenever I'm actually live. So I apologize, I can't remember what your name was. I hope this is close to what the pattern you were looking for. I'm going to get some clear coat put on this bad boy, and we'll come back and take a look at what it looks like all finished up.